I saw my daughter-in-law, her face cold, her eyes hollow, hurl a suitcase violently into the lake. The splash echoed sharp and dry, ripples spreading across the crimson glow of sunset. She stood still for a few seconds, then turned away and drove off, disappearing behind the line of trees. A chilling instinct rose within me. Something terrible was hidden inside that suitcase. I rushed down the muddy bank, my shoes sinking into the cold sludge, my heart pounding out of rhythm. And then, a faint sound emerged, muffled and desperate, like a cry for help coming from within. "Oh Lord, please don't let it be what I think it is," I whispered, my trembling hand reaching for the soaked zipper. When I pulled it open, my heart stopped. The sight inside froze me completely, my breath catching in my throat. In 64 years of life, I had never known terror like this. The wind cut across the lake, cold as a blade. I stood there, shivering, unable to look away from what lay within that suitcase. But for you to understand how I came to witness such a thing, take a second to hit like, subscribe, and share, because what began as a peaceful September afternoon soon turned into the darkest memory of my entire life. The clock showed 5:25 that hour when the sun seems trapped between day and night, casting a blood-red glow over the cup of tea I had just poured. The cicadas had gone silent, as if the whole world were holding its breath. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and salt from Lake Meridian, seeping into my throat, salty, dry, and weighted with an unshakable sense of dread. I stood on the porch of the house where I had once raised Daniel, my only son. It was right here that he used to sit, tapping his foot, softly humming along to the old records I'd play every evening. Now, there was only the sound of the wind passing through where he used to sit, brushing past the doorway like the breath of a lingering soul. The house had become too large, too quiet, too full of ghosts since the day he died 7 months ago. The lake before the house lay still as glass, reflecting the deep hues of sunset as though the water itself was slowly devouring its own reflection. And then I saw her. A flash of light flickered on the dirt road, the glint of sunlight off a windshield, cutting through the eerie stillness. Marissa Kincaid's silver Toyota appeared, kicking up clouds of dust. My daughter-in-law, Daniel's widow. The car sped forward, shaking violently, its tires grinding over gravel with a sound like gunfire echoing through the empty air. The engine roared, urgent, angry, and desperate. I wanted to believe it was just a mechanical problem, but the instinct of a father who's lost a child screamed otherwise. No, something's wrong. The car skidded toward the lake's edge, only a few feet from plunging in. The stench of burning rubber hit me, sharp enough to make my chest tighten. I dropped my teacup, it shattered, but I barely heard it over the dying growl of the engine. The car door flung open so hard it nearly ripped off the hinges. Marissa stumbled out, eyes bloodshot, breath broken, like someone running from hell itself. She wore the red dress Daniel had given her on their wedding day, the one that made him almost cry when he saw her walk down the aisle. Now it was dusty, wrinkled, torn like their marriage itself. Her lipstick was smeared, mascara streaked down her pale, exhausted face. She opened the trunk. The dry crack of the latch echoed, and goosebumps ran down my arms. Then I saw it. The brown suitcase, that damned wedding gift I once gave her. The scratch where Daniel had carved their initials was still there. I remembered what I'd told her back then. "I'm giving you this so you can carry your dreams wherever you go." Naive. Foolish. Because today, she might be carrying someone's death instead. Marissa pulled the suitcase out, bent down, her arms trembling. Her eyes darted wildly, full of panic, as if she feared someone was watching her, as if something unseen was chasing right behind. I called out, "Marissa!" My voice cracked. The wind carried it away before it could reach her. She swung the suitcase, shouted something I couldn't hear, and threw it. The water exploded with a sound like a gunshot. A flock of wild ducks burst up from the reeds, scattering across the burning sky as if they were witnesses to a crime just committed. The suitcase didn't sink right away. It floated, rocking, tilting, as though something inside was struggling to get out. Marissa spun around, eyes wide, lips trembling. She burst into tears, then screamed, "I'm sorry," before jumping back into the car. The tires screeched, gravel flew, dust and gasoline fumes swirled together in the fading light. The car sped away, vanishing down the old road, leaving behind the roar of its engine tearing through the evening calm. I stood frozen. Only the faint plopping of water and the steady ticking of the clock inside the house remained cruelly calm, as if nothing had happened at all. The lake was a dull mirror now, reflecting my face and the half-sunken suitcase, staring back at me like an unblinking eye. My heart raced, not from fear alone. What was inside that suitcase felt like something that should not exist in this world. I didn't care if the broken glass from the teacup had cut my foot. My body moved on its own, trembling, desperate. Every breath felt like a blade scraping my lungs. My knees ached, but only one thought pulsed in my mind. "Daniel, could this be about you?" The lake was only a few dozen meters away, but every second stretched like eternity. I crossed the yard, down the dirt path. Lake Meridian no longer looked peaceful. It was thick, dark, and still as though guarding a secret it refused to reveal. The suitcase floated heavily, one corner slightly open. From it, a scrap of white fabric surfaced the edge of a shirt. Then I heard a faint thump beneath the water. It sounded like it was sinking deeper. No hesitation, no prayer. I dove in. The water was freezing, thick with the stench of mud. Each step pulled me deeper into a pit of memories I thought I'd buried. I reached out, grabbed the suitcase, handle slick plastic, slippery under my grasp. Mud clung to my hands, heavy as guilt, but I didn't let go. The suitcase was unbearably heavy, as if it held the sins of two souls. I pulled, inch by inch, water splashing against my face. The metal clasp clanged a sound so cold it nearly stopped my heart. The suitcase shifted. I jerked backward, fell into the shallows, water dripping down my hair and into my eyes. It lay there still, weighty, ominous. I stared at it, every muscle trembling, and for a split second I swore I heard something inside. A faint sound, a heartbeat, or a moan. I crawled closer, hands shaking uncontrollably. I knew after tonight nothing in Lake Meridian would ever rest again. And if there truly is a God above, then may He help me. The lid of the suitcase burst open. A wave of cold air escaped, a mixture of milk, blood, and mud. My throat tightened. The world around me seemed to dissolve. No wind, no sound. Only a vast emptiness swallowing me whole. Inside, wrapped in a soaked white blanket, was a newborn baby. Tiny, fragile, motionless. Its lips were purple, its skin pale as wax, its eyelids shut tight. No movement. The skin was so thin, I could see faint blue veins shimmering beneath the surface. Its eyelashes trembled, or was that only my imagination? I couldn't tell. Oh God, no, it can't be. I covered my mouth to keep the scream from tearing out of me. The baby's little hand was stiff, cold as metal, but when I touched it gently, the smallest finger curled ever so slightly. A movement so faint it pierced straight through my heart. The umbilical cord was still there, hastily tied with a rubber band, stained with patches of dried blood. Why would she do this? In panic, in guilt, in utter solitude. A part of me wanted to cry out Daniel's name, but my tongue felt bound, my throat locked. Was this the price for everything that had come before? An image of Marissa Kincaid flashed through my mind, her red eyes, her trembling hands as she threw the suitcase. It couldn't be, and yet it could. I pressed my ear against the baby's chest. Silence. Then I brought my cheek to its nose, holding my breath, afraid that even my own breathing would drown out the fragile sound I was hoping to hear. And then I felt it, a faint breath, so weak it could have been imagined, but it was real. A soft hiccup, as thin as a whisper of wind. The tiny chest rose and fell. My whole body went numb with a painful kind of awe. I had once held Daniel when he took his first breath, and now, in the same posture, I was holding another fragile life that had just risen from the depths of the lake. Its body was cold, light as a sack of sand. I held it tightly, trembling, feeling the faint pulse beating weakly against my own ribs. With the last of my strength, I stood up. My legs quivered, my knees torn and bleeding. Water dripped from my arms onto the baby's cheeks. I ran, fell, got back up. Mud splattered everywhere. Each breath sounded like a funeral drum. Every drop of water that fell was another second slipping away. I knew if I was even one step too late, one heartbeat of its tiny chest would stop forever. A shard from the broken teacup earlier had lodged into my foot, burning hot as if my blood was spilling in its place. The wind screamed past my ears, trees swaying violently. The world seemed to spin backward, throwing me into the memory of the first time I held Daniel in my arms. "Don't give up, child. Please don't give up," I whispered, letting my breath blend with its own. The sun was setting, the red light spreading across the lake like spilled blood. My shadow and the baby's merged into two souls, bound by a single breath. I kicked the door open. The hinges screamed like something alive. I stumbled into the table, a vase fell, shattering, water and petals splashing under my feet. Everything collapsed into chaos, the sound of breaking glass, pounding heartbeat, ragged breath. I grabbed the landline from the kitchen. One arm held the baby, the other dialed. My fingers slipped on the keypad. The phone nearly dropped twice. I could hardly see the numbers every second stretched into a lifetime. A woman's voice came through distant hollow, like it was coming from a dream. 911, please state your emergency. I stammered. "A baby! I just pulled it from the lake. It's not breathing. It's turning blue. Please send someone right now." Her voice was calm, cold, but professional. The kind of voice that has heard thousands of tragedies and is not allowed to let the heart tremble. "Sir, please stay calm. Give me your address." I gave her the address, every number cracked between gasps for air. "All right," she said, clearly, slowly. "Lay the baby on a flat surface. Start drying and keeping it warm. The ambulance is on its way." I swept everything off the table, plates shattered, tea splashed up the wall. Glass shards cut my hand, blood mixed with water. I placed the baby down so light the wooden surface didn't even creak. In that moment, it felt as though I was touching a soul, not a body. "Is the baby breathing?" I leaned close, watching the tiny chest rise and fall, then stop. Or maybe it was only my own heartbeat making me think it moved. I see just a little, so faint, almost gone." "Listen to me," the dispatcher said firmly. "Find a clean towel, wipe gently, then wrap the baby to keep it warm. The ambulance is just minutes away." I tore open the cupboard. Towels spilled onto the floor. One fell into a puddle of tea, but I grabbed it anyway, no time to tell clean from dirty. I wiped the small cheeks, that face. It looked exactly like Daniel when he was born. My heart clenched like a fist inside my chest. "Don't leave me. Please don't leave me," I whispered. I didn't even know who I was speaking to, the baby, or the spirit of my dead son. I wrapped it in the towel, held it close to my chest. I began rocking, not to soothe the baby, but to keep myself from collapsing. Each minute of waiting was a century. The ticking clock in the kitchen stabbed at my heart. If I lost another child, I wouldn't survive it. Then, from a distance, came the sound of a faint siren, growing louder, sharper, until it screamed right outside the door. It was the cry of life clawing its way back against death. Red and white lights flashed into the house, splashing across the ceiling, across the wedding photo of Daniel and Marissa. I turned away. I pulled the latch, slammed the window open. My forehead hit the frame, blood trickled down, but I didn't feel it. I shouted as loud as I could. 2 paramedics rushed in, a silver-bearded man and a young woman with black hair tied in a ponytail. The woman took the baby from my arms with a swift, precise motion that made me finally exhale. The stethoscope touched the baby's skin, producing a dry, hollow sound, like wind blowing through an empty pipe. Her shoulders tensed. "Severe hypothermia. Possible drowning. Stabilize here, then we move." In an instant, my kitchen became an emergency room. A small stretcher, oxygen mask, wires, beeping monitors. The 2 of them moved like synchronized wings, fighting wordlessly for one fragile breath. The older man looked up and said firmly, "You're coming with us." I nodded. Inside the ambulance, the siren's wail pounded against my chest. The flashing lights turned the interior into a pulsing, artificial heartbeat. I looked at the baby, its tiny face almost hidden under the oxygen mask, like an angel kept alive by wires and metal. The nurse, her name tag read, Rowan Pierce, monitored the vitals while speaking quickly. "If it's fresh water, the survival chance is higher, but we have to reach the hospital in 8 minutes." I glanced at the clock on the ambulance wall. The second hand refused to move. "How did you find the baby?" she asked, eyes still fixed on the monitor. In a suitcase, under the lake. I saw someone throw it in." She looked up sharply, then exchanged a quick glance with her colleague. That look, was it worry, suspicion, or pity? I couldn't tell. "Did you recognize that person?" I opened my mouth, but my throat locked. Images of Marissa flashed in my mind. Daniel's bride, the widow at the coffin, the woman by the water's edge. Why her? She once called me father. I swallowed hard, lips trembling. Yes, I saw her clearly. The nurse turned to her partner and said quietly, "Record that." The air inside the ambulance thickened. The vehicle swerved sharply. I gripped the seat to stay upright. Red light swept across the baby's face, alive 1 second, fading the next. I kept praying, "If God is real, please don't take this one too." The clock's hand finally moved 6:03, the exact time Daniel had died. I froze. Fate was repeating itself. And at that very moment, the baby's tiny finger curled. Everyone held their breath. The nurse shouted, "We've got a response!" A faint flush of pink returned to its skin. I burst into tears, not knowing whether it was out of fear or hope. The ambulance screeched to a halt before the hospital gate, its tires leaving a long black scar across the asphalt. The siren's wail bounced off the concrete walls, echoing like the desperate cry of someone trapped between life and death. The emergency doors swung open, spilling out a rush of sterile white light. A blast of cold air swept through, carrying the mingled scent of antiseptic, blood, and thick, suffocating fear. I followed the stretcher inside, gripping the edge of the metal rail until a nurse pried my hand loose. The skin of my palm tore, blood smeared against the freezing steel. Inside, chaos erupted, the pounding of medical shoes, the rapid beeping of monitors, someone shouting, "Intubation! Get the tube ready!" under the blinding white glare. Then the double doors slammed shut behind the baby. I stood still, soaked and trembling while everyone else ran. I was the only one frozen, the one who had looked death in the eye and was still breathing. The waiting room felt like a morgue. The fluorescent lights reflected off the wet tiles. Each drip from the air conditioner hit the floor like the ticking of a countdown clock. The smell of lake mud mixed with disinfectant filled the air, twisting my stomach. The pale cream walls turned gray, the color of souls not yet released. I had never feared hospitals. Until today. Because the last time I sat in a waiting room like this was the day Evelyn took her final breath. No one looked at me. Only the distant voice of the intercom broke the silence. Code red, room 4. Cold as a funeral bell. A figure in white approached, slow, weary, carrying the heaviness of someone who had lived too long between the edges of life and death. The name tag on her coat read, Rowan Pierce. Her eyes were the color of ash, the kind that belongs only to those who have seen too much suffering. "Take a deep breath," she said softly, her tone calm and professional, but not without warmth. "I won't ask too many questions, but I need every detail." And I told her. Each word dragged up mud, water, and blood. I told her about the flash of light on Marissa's windshield, the click of the suitcase lock, the drenched white blanket, and the breath as thin as mist. Rowan didn't interrupt. She only nodded occasionally, sighing quietly from time to time. When I mentioned Marissa, the image of her by Daniel's coffin flashed in my mind, tearful eyes, trembling hands laying a white flower atop the lid. Now I wondered how much of that had been real. An alarm blared down the corridor. Rowan didn't flinch. Perhaps she'd long grown used to the sound of danger. Outside, another ambulance screamed into the night. Every siren felt like a reminder the baby was still fighting for its life. I didn't know how I managed to keep speaking. Maybe because I needed someone to believe me, or because I feared that if I didn't, I'd lose my mind. Finally, Rowan looked up. Her voice was soft but firm, leaving no room for doubt. "The police will need to speak with you. This is an attempted murder." Those 2 words fell like stones into the lake of my memory, sending out ripples, each one carrying an image I never wanted to see again. I let go. The cup of water she'd handed me slipped from my grasp. My fingers trembled, and the liquid shimmered over the edge, clear as diluted blood. I wanted to laugh, but the sound caught in my throat, breaking into a dry sob instead. My daughter-in-law. My son's wife. A murderer. Reason told me she must pay, but another part of me screamed. She once called me father. Rowan placed her hand gently over mine, warm, steady. "You did the right thing," she whispered. "You saved a life today." But it didn't feel that way. It felt like I had just opened the lid of something monstrous, a dark secret dragged up from the bottom of the lake, something I could never shove back down, something that would change everything forever. "Sometimes," Rowan said, meeting my eyes, "the people we trust most do the things we least imagine." Her voice carried no judgment, only sorrow, sorrow deep enough to sound personal. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from understanding. I realized then my hands were ice cold. I was shaking not from the rain, but from fear. White light spilled from the emergency room through the gap in the door, sharp as a blade. Something in that light made me shiver, as if the secret itself was still gasping between 2 worlds. "Do you have any family we can contact?" Rowan asked. "No one left," I said. The words dropped from my mouth like stones. A baby cried in the next room, a thin, frail sound that faded abruptly into silence. I held my breath. I thought I heard water dripping not from the ceiling but from inside my head. The whisper of Lake Meridian, refusing to let me go. I knew when the police arrived, they'd ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. But maybe the truth had to be spoken, even if it destroyed me. I looked down at my hands, still covered in mud. And I understood. That smell would never wash away. Evelyn once told me, "No secret stays buried forever, Arthur." Now I understood. She'd been right. I just never thought that I'd be the one digging up the grave. I used to think the greatest tragedy of my life was losing my wife and my son. But now I knew. The real tragedy was discovering who had murdered my faith. I thought I had saved a life. But perhaps what I pulled from Lake Meridian wasn't life at all. It was the truth, something that should have drowned long ago. The door swung open after 2 hours. A doctor appeared, his white coat stained with saline, pen crooked in his chest pocket, the face of a man who had just pulled someone back from the edge of darkness. Behind him stood a woman doctor, lips pressed tight, who only gave a small nod. "The baby is temporarily stable," he said, his tone clipped and factual. "Currently in the NICU. We've placed an endotracheal tube and initiated active warming with heated blankets. Lactate levels remain high, signs of hypoxia. The lungs are damaged from water intake. The next 36 hours are critical. Every minute is an anchor." The female doctor added curtly, "The risk of neurological complications is significant." I wanted to ask, "Will it live?" But my tongue felt sewn to the roof of my mouth. In the room, the monitor kept beeping, beep, beep, each sound like a nail tapping on a coffin lid. Half an hour later, the police arrived. A woman in her 50s, with her hair pulled into a tight bun, as if every compromise in life had been tied away with it. Her coat was perfectly pressed, not a single crease. Following her was a young male officer carrying a notepad. "Detective Mira Calder," she said, flashing her badge. Her dark eyes cut through me like searchlights through bone. She didn't ask, "Are you all right?" She asked, "What was the exact time the incident began?" Then she went straight for the core. "Why are you certain it was Marissa Kincaid? Do you wear glasses? What's your eyesight? Did you drink alcohol or take sedatives last night?" I described the silver Toyota, the red dress, the timing, the throwing motion. Calder placed a clear zip bag before me. Inside was a piece of soaked red fabric, fished from the lake's edge. "Look at this. Who does it belong to?" "Marissa," I said too quickly. She tilted her head slightly, as if making a mental note. And you're certain it was your daughter-in-law? Absolutely certain. Why would she do such a thing? I don't know. Where is she now? I don't know. When did you last speak to her? 4 weeks ago, the day we held Daniel's memorial. Calder slid 3 printed photos across the table, stills from a security camera. 6:20 p.m. Yesterday, a supermarket 20 miles from the lake. Marissa's car in the parking lot. The driver appears to be a man. You're sure you didn't misread the gender? I swallowed hard. I was about 100 yards away, maybe more, mostly saw from behind. My voice trembled. She shifted her stance. Sit down, Mr. Mercer. People standing tend to speak what they want to believe. Sitting down helps them remember what's true. She read back the address I gave during the 911 call, then asked, "How did you know the distance to the lake so precisely?" I froze. In my mind flashed a streak of brownish hair, not entirely black, and the sharp scent of peppermint as the car sped past. Marissa hated peppermint. If it wasn't Marissa, had I colored my memory to match my anger? Calder lowered her voice. "Grief," she said, "is the best liar I've ever met." She stood, closing her notebook. "Tomorrow morning report to the station for a formal statement. You are not to contact Marissa. Understood?" I nodded like a man standing on the edge of a pit. Rowan Pierce returned with a blanket and a cup of hot coffee. "You should go home, change, get some rest," she said. But I didn't move. The NICU was right there. I couldn't leave the baby the same fragile breath that had once pressed against my heart. The night dragged on. The plastic chair was as hard as penance. Every hour I rose to ask, and every time the answer was the same: stable, critical, still fighting. Father Gabriel Knox arrived around 3 in the morning. He sat beside me without preaching. "Just sit," he said. "I'll count breaths with you." And we did until my heartbeat slowed. He whispered, "Lord, if there is a mistake here, let the truth hurt today rather than kill tomorrow." I exhaled, weary. "This doesn't feel like a test. It feels like a curse." He nodded. After my brother's funeral, my father saw a suspect in everyone he met. Grief can turn good men into terrible judges. He pulled out a hand-sewn handkerchief, placing it gently in my hand. "If your hands shake, hold this, not someone's throat." Dawn softened the darkness. The orange light through the glass cut the corridor like a fine blade. I sat there, my back aching, eyes burning. Each time I closed them, I saw the suitcase sinking, the purple lips, the motionless body. At 6:30, Rowan returned with coffee and a sandwich. The coffee burned my tongue. The bread was dry as cardboard, yet I chewed, as though relearning how to be human. "The baby's still stable," she said. "Temperature's rising, lungs are responding. That's a good sign." "Can I see him?" I asked. "Not yet, only immediate family, and we still don't know who the baby belongs to." The word family struck like a blow. The baby needed a mother that was Marissa. But she had... What? And what about the father? Who was he? Where was he? Why hadn't anyone reported a missing child? At 9:15 a.m., Mira Calder returned, this time alone, carrying a thick file. "There are inconsistencies," she began, laying down photos from 2 separate cameras, 5:25 p.m. at the lake and 5:18 p.m. from your driveway, the car heading the opposite direction. "The timeline isn't on your side, Mr. Mercer. Has your home clock been adjusted for daylight savings?" My stomach dropped. The clock had been slow for months. "I'm not lying," I said through clenched teeth. "Then we find Marissa quickly," she replied, closing the file. "If she's the mother, the child is in danger. If she's not, we're facing something far darker." She slid her card across the table. At the corner she'd scribbled, "Rear window decal." I froze. Marissa's car didn't have one. By noon, Father Knox returned. We prayed quietly, voices trembling. A thin layer of faith covered the panic like glass over a wound. I counted silently. If I'm wrong, I'll confess before I speak another word. If I'm right, I'll see this through to the end. At 4 p.m., an older female doctor arrived, thick glasses fogged with fatigue. "We need your consent for further testing blood work Exposure screening, hidden trauma scans. The social worker is on her way, but we can't wait. I signed without reading. I just wanted the baby safe. 2 hours later, the social worker arrived Sloane Park. Young, sharp, polished, black suit, thick notebook, a practiced smile. The questions came again, but this time, sharper. Do you live alone? Is your income steady? Where do you store prescribed medication? Do your stairs have railings? Any child-proof barriers near water? Love doesn't qualify as a legal safeguard, she said evenly. Infant care requires endurance and skill. Do you have consistent support? You are the first and only witness. The system cannot place a child with someone who might be a suspect tomorrow. She slid a foster care 101 pamphlet toward me, as if handing out a flyer. Then Sloane's expression softened. I believe you saved that baby. But I need documents proving you can keep him safe. For the first time, her eyes met mine genuinely. Rowan hurried over, pressing my coat into my hands. Keep warm, she said. You can't fight if you're frozen. I laughed, hoarse and exhausted. She leaned close and whispered, A nurse in NICU said the baby has a birthmark shaped like a teardrop behind the left shoulder. The words dropped into my mind like a stone striking a map of identity, faint, but enough to ripple everything. I looked at the photocopy Calder had left behind. In the image, the rear window bore a small decal, and the suitcase I'd pulled from the lake had fresh scratches on the right side. The entrance to my house had no gravel, but the east bank of the lake did. In my memory, the hand that threw the suitcase wore a glove. But who wears gloves this season? Marissa hated them. Maybe the video was right, maybe I had seen wrong. Or maybe I had seen right, and someone was setting me up. Either way, both paths led toward death. I took Calder's card, dialed her number. You said we need to find Marissa. I'm coming with you. I know that lake better than anyone, and if the truth still lies beneath that water, then I'll go back down after it. The sun sank behind the trees, its last light falling onto the lake like a coin dropping to the bottom, leaving a trail of shimmering gold. I returned to the exact spot from the day before, where I had dragged the suitcase up from the shore. The police had taken the suitcase. Only a long print of dried mud remained on the ground. The wind moved through the reeds, making a rustle that sounded like someone trying to smother a sob. On the ground, I saw a few streaks of black resin trailing in the direction opposite from where Marissa Kincaid usually parked. The air carried a faint scent of peppermint, the kind of perfume Marissa despised, yet it was exactly what I'd smelled at the lake. Among the grass lay a gray thread, clotted with mud. I bent to pick it up. The fabric was coarse, unlike what Marissa had been wearing that day. If I had seen wrong, then who was the one who threw the suitcase into the lake? And if I had seen right, who was arranging things to make me look like a fool? The lake had darkened, flat as a mirror, reflecting back the empty eyes of someone who had just brushed against fate. A phone rang, shattering the silence. I started so hard I nearly slipped. Rowan Pierce's voice came over the line. Come back immediately. Only 4 words, but her breath was quick, a sign that something serious had happened. I ran to get the car and drove fast, the speedometer trembling, a horn blaring behind me, but my heart pounded louder than the engine. Brake lights flared on the car ahead, and for a moment I saw again the final image of Daniel's car in the rain that day. The hospital corridor was bright and cold as an interrogation room. The antiseptic stung my eyes. Rowan was waiting, her face composed, but her fingers kept rubbing her ring, the habit she had whenever she was tense. We didn't stop at the neonatal ward. Instead, we went straight up to the 3rd floor, into a small conference room with frosted glass. Inside, 3 people were already seated around a wooden table. Detective Mira Calder, eyes sharp and disciplined. Social worker Sloane Park, aligning a stack of files into a neat square. And a man of about 62 in a dark suit, glasses gleaming, the sort of person careful to the last detail. Calder gestured. Please sit. We have the baby's DNA results. The words dropped and thickened the air in the room. I hadn't yet grasped what they were saying when Calder slid the paper toward me. A boy, born 3 days ago, and, Mr. Mercer, the baby is your grandson. The world seemed to stop turning. I heard the words, but my mind couldn't receive them. Impossible. The man adjusted his glasses lightly and introduced himself. I'm Dr. Keaton Ives, forensic genetics. We've verified multiple times. 35% of the baby's DNA matches yours. The margin of error is virtually zero. The boy is certainly Daniel's son. I echoed, my voice catching. My Daniel's son. My chest felt packed with sand. In my mind, Daniel held a faceless child. It laughed, then vanished into the screech of memory's breaks. But how? Daniel's been dead 7 months. Marissa never said she was pregnant. Calder leaned forward, her tone even. She conceived about a month before the accident, which means she knew. The air seemed to whirl around me. Marissa knew she was pregnant when Daniel died, so why the silence? Did she hide it for 9 months to protect someone, or to destroy someone? Dr. Ives interjected. Another detail. Who purchased the life insurance policy for Daniel before the accident? Calder flipped through more papers. We've just rechecked. The brake system shows signs of tampering. The car was taken to an out-of-town garage, paid in cash. The owner has a record and used to work somewhere familiar to Marissa. The day Daniel died coincides with a large transfer into an anonymous account. The conference room turned frigid. Sloan spoke softly, almost a whisper. If the brakes were sabotaged, who benefits? Marissa, or someone trying to take them both but only one fell? Calder looked at me, her gaze like a blade. If Marissa didn't throw the suitcase, then she's the next one someone will try to throw. I wanted to object, but part of me trembled. I remembered the peppermint at the lake, a scent that did not belong to Marissa. Calder continued. Marissa's perfume is jasmine, not peppermint. Then she placed another photo on the table. A camera caught a different woman, in a black dress, appearing 15 minutes earlier. Shorter hair, different rear window decal. The gray thread you picked up doesn't match Marissa's dress. And the person who threw the suitcase wore gloves. Marissa hates gloves. I went rigid, the same questions looping in my head. If the video was right, I had been wrong. If I was right, someone was framing me. Either way, both paths could end in death. I asked, my voice hoarse, and the baby? How is he? Rowan took my hand lightly. He's still fighting. His temperature is more stable, and his lungs are responding. But the next 24 hours are still very dangerous. I nodded, as if someone had roughly stitched a tear in my heart closed for the moment. Sloan went on, her tone cool. For now, the child is under state protection until we can determine the legal family. If there are criminal elements, the process becomes far more complicated. The words burst out of me. I'll take guardianship of my grandson. Sloan regarded me soberly. Affection is one matter. We need documents proving you can provide for the child. The overhead light flickered, then steadied. From far off came a weak infant cry that quickly fell silent. I turned instinctively, but Rowan said gently, not his cry. Calder closed the file. We have 2 lines to run in parallel. Find the mother and trace the brake sabotage. One thread will lead to the other. And Mr. Mercer, if you remember any detail at all, a smell, a location, the wind's direction, or any foreign object along the east bank, call me immediately. I looked down at my hand and saw a crust of dried mud still clinging beneath a nail mud from Lake Meridian. Softly I murmured, why must my son's child suffer another tragedy just because the adults want to keep their secrets? Rowan looked at me, her voice low and warm. Sometimes, to save a child, we have to burn down the house that's sheltering him. I clenched my fist. The thought would not leave me. My son did not simply die in an accident. He was murdered, and the woman I once called my daughter-in-law had vanished like ash in the wind. For 7 months, I had lit candles for a death wrapped in lies. I looked at my hands, the same hands that had touched Daniel Mercer's cold skin in the funeral home, and wondered, had I held the body of a victim without knowing it? Marissa, I said. It was not a question. It was a verdict. Detective Mira Calder replied in her composed, frosted tone. She is our prime suspect. Marissa disappeared right before the warrant was signed. No cameras, no transactions, no phone signals. She erased everything as if she knew exactly when we'd come for her. I slammed my palm on the table, spilling coffee across the surface. Why didn't you protect her? No one answered. Those who live among the pain of others know that silence can be crueler than words. I needed air. Pressing my forehead to the window, I watched the city lights blur in the glass. Thousands of lights out there, and one burning inside me. My son, she killed him, I whispered. A hand touched my shoulder, Sloane Parks. There's something you need to know about the baby, she said gently. Because he's your biological grandson, you have legal standing. You can apply for guardianship. I was about to speak, but she cut me off. It's a long process: psychological evaluation, home inspection, interviews, legal review. Until then, the child remains under state care. I growled. No, you won't take him from me. He's all I have left of Daniel. Sloane's voice stayed calm but firm. I understand, but the system has procedures. The child's safety comes first. Dr. Keaton Ives, who had been silent all this time, finally spoke. The infant has suffered severe trauma hypothermia, near drowning. The next few weeks are crucial. Treatment, therapy, constant monitoring. I'll do anything, I said. Anything. Calder stood, her tone steady but not unkind. You're not a suspect, Arthur. We believe you. But you can't keep the child just because he's your grandson. Until the legal process is complete, our priority is finding Marissa, and we need your help. How can I help? I asked. Think carefully. Any place special she mentioned. Relatives, old friends, a place she might hide. I raked through the dim fragments of memory from their 3 years of marriage. Marissa had never spoken about her family. Her past was blank, as if she'd fallen from the sky the day she met Daniel. Then I remembered. She had an aunt somewhere up north near the border. Daniel once said Marissa grew up with her. Name? Calder asked. I don't know, I said. Daniel never told me. That's a start. We'll investigate. She gathered her files and left. The others followed, until only Rowan Pierce remained. Would you like to see your grandson? He asked softly. I nodded, words caught in my throat. Through the NICU security door, I washed my hands and put on a sterile gown. In the corner, inside an incubator, lay my grandson Daniel's son. Tiny, fragile, covered in tubes and wires, but alive. He was breathing, fighting. His hair was dark like Daniel's, his nose the same shape, his fingers long and delicate. Can I touch him? I asked. Yes, Rowan said, gently. I slipped my hand through the small opening and touched his little hand, soft and warm. His fingers closed around my index finger, just a reflex, but to me, it was a promise. Hello, little one, I whispered. I'm your grandfather. I promise to protect you. No one will ever hurt you again. I swear it on your father's memory. Rowan placed a steady hand on my shoulder. He needs a name, he said quietly, for hospital records, until we locate his mother or receive a court decision. I remembered Daniel once saying, if I ever have a son, I'll name him Jonah. Jonah, I said softly. His name is Jonah. I sat beside the incubator all night, holding his tiny hand, humming the songs I once sang to Daniel, promising Jonah a future, though I didn't know if I was strong enough to give him one. Now I knew with certainty. This wasn't a stranger I had pulled from the lake. This was my blood. My family. The only piece of my murdered son that remained. And I would let no one take him, not the state, not Marissa, not anyone. My heart pounded violently, but this time it wasn't fear. It was resolve. Because to save a child, sometimes you must burn down the house built on lies. I stood, looking through the NICU glass, the white light reflecting off Jonah's fragile skin, and whispered, I'll tell you the rest of the story, my boy. Those days did not pass. They dragged, heavy, endless, each minute stretched by paperwork, stamps, and signatures. Every document felt like a new scratch carved into my heart. Each morning began at 5:30 with a cold shower. By 6:15, I was at the hospital parking lot. By 7, I entered the NICU where Jonah lay inside the incubator. The steady beep, beep of the monitor was like a metronome of fate, each sound marking a countdown to a verdict we were all waiting for. Afternoons brought visits from social workers. They came in groups, carrying lists of questions. making me feel not like a human being, but like a crime scene under investigation. On the third day, Sloane Park read aloud from her clipboard, voice flat and practiced. Criminal background check, psychological evaluation, physical exam, income verification, home inspection, 3 reference letters, and a 50-hour childcare course. 50 hours of lessons for them to believe I could change a diaper, but perhaps a lifetime would not be enough to forget that I'd lost my son. 6 weeks if everything goes smoothly, Sloane said. 4 months if there are complications. I nodded silently, tucking the thick stack of papers as heavy as scripture into my bag. I understood. Anger wouldn't win me custody of my grandson. They examined even the coldest details: medicine cabinets, power outlets, escape routes, photos of every corner of my home. Sloane reminded me, her tone clinical. Love is necessary, but the system requires proof. The 50-hour course tested more than my patience, it pressed on my pride. In a classroom of 25 young mothers, I was the only silver-haired man. The instructor, a young woman with a sweet but condescending voice, said, "Never shake a newborn, ever." Meanwhile, my house was inspected room by room, cupboards opened, railings measured, windows shaken, smoke detectors counted, even the expiration dates of milk checked. "We assess risk, not affection," one of them said, brief and emotionless. That night, I called Father Gabriel Knox. He handed me a small wooden cross and said, "When fear comes, count the baby's breaths. That's how you remember faith." "I'm 64, I said quietly. "What if I'm too old for this?" He smiled. "Age doesn't raise children. Love does." On the 4th day, Nurse Rowan Pierce guided me through hands-on training, taking temperatures, mixing formula. Every time I changed a diaper, my hands trembled as if walking on thin ice. "You're not clumsy," Rowan said. "You're learning again, but this time, with your heart." On the 5th day, Detective Mira Calder arrived with new findings. "We located Marissa Kincaid's aunt. She lives in a border town. They haven't spoken in 2 years. Marissa owes her $4,000. Then she added, her tone tightening, 3 weeks after Daniel's death, $300,000 from his life insurance was transferred into Marissa's account and then wired offshore to the Cayman Islands. "Why drown the baby?" I demanded. Calder dropped a folder onto the table. "Daniel's will. Before his death, Daniel amended it. His assets would go to his future children, not to Marissa." The air left my lungs. Kill the father, drown the son, both for the same reason: money. I passed every test. Clean record, good health. The psychological evaluation was the hardest. "How do you feel about Marissa? Are you using Jonah to replace Daniel?" "No," I answered. "I'm keeping a promise to someone who was murdered." The doctor wrote something down. I didn't know if it was in my favor. I took down Daniel's old poster from the wall. Each tier of tape sounded like ripping a memory. I repainted the room pale yellow, the color of a sun that never sets. Father Knox blessed the space. "May this room be shielded from whatever evil once walked through its door." I choked out a question, bitter and raw. "How can anyone call this God's plan when he lets good men die and an innocent child nearly drown?" The priest's answer was quiet, yet deep. "Because in his plan, evil is never the final word. It's transformed into redemption. Love still wins, even through suffering." The court hearing took place on a Wednesday. The judge, an older man with silver hair, spoke firmly. "You are not asking to be a hero, you are asking to be a grandfather." Then the gavel struck. "Temporary guardianship for 6 months is granted to Mr. Arthur Mercer." Sloane whispered beside me, "You did it." 3 days later, I brought Jonah home. I drove slowly, as if carrying a crystal heart. The house became a fortress: safety locks, cameras, alarms wired directly to the police. The first nights were filled with the scent of milk, diapers, and sanitizer. The whole world revolved around Jonah's breath. When his tiny hand clasped my finger, when he stilled at the sound of my voice, when his black eyes, Daniel's eyes, opened wide, all exhaustion melted away. The weeks that followed were draining but miraculous. Rowan visited 3 times a week, teaching me every small detail: how to burp him, how to swaddle, how to recognize each kind of cry. She was not just a nurse, she was the line between life and despair. But Marissa still hadn't been caught. Every slow-moving car outside made my heart race. One night, I went through Daniel's box of belongings. At the bottom, I found a black leather notebook and his phone. Inside were entries written shortly before he died. Marissa is secretive, never speaks about her family. Caught her checking my bank statements. Marissa is pregnant, doesn't want to keep it. I changed my will today. A child isn't an accessory. I'll protect it no matter what. The final page read, Marissa threatened me. Tomorrow I'll tell Dad. I can't let her hurt the baby. But that tomorrow never came. At dawn, I asked Rowan to watch Jonah and took the notebook and phone to Detective Calder. She said, this is enough motive, intent, method. The technicians unlocked Daniel's phone. The messages appeared like confessions carved in glass. Daniel, I know about the baby. Marissa, I don't want to keep it. Daniel, if you end the pregnancy, I'll divorce you. Marissa, you'll regret this. The next day, Daniel was dead. Calder continued. Ricky Alvarez, the mechanic, confessed. He received $5,000, said Marissa paid him to cut the brakes. The arrest warrant had already been issued, but Marissa had disappeared again. I returned home. Jonah was asleep, peaceful. I whispered to him, your father loved you. He died to protect you, and now I will continue that promise. Rowan set down a cup of coffee beside me and said softly, I heard about the case. Daniel's messages. He was strong. I nodded. Love makes people stronger than they ever believe. On the 20th night, the motion light on the porch suddenly flicked on. The camera recorded a woman in a black dress, silently slipping past the fence and vanishing into the dark. Right after that, my phone vibrated 3 short times and went quiet. I was holding Jonah, one hand still supporting his head. When the 4th vibration began to hum, I picked up. It felt as if someone in the darkness had just taken my hand. On the other end of the line there was not only breathing but wind, and far away, the sound of a train horn. Mercer, a flat, icy voice. Don't drop him. I hate the sound of a baby crying. Marissa Kincaid. The name froze my blood. My eyes swept the room, searching for an invisible shadow. Where are you? It doesn't matter where I am. What matters is I have what you want, and you have what I need. I want nothing from you. You're wrong. You don't need money. You don't need justice. You want a reason, an explanation good enough to let you sleep at night. I stayed silent, secretly switched to record, put the call on speaker, and began recording the entire conversation. What do you want? Money or an audience? She laughed a laugh with no tone. People only call something a monster when they can't control it. I want my son. Your son? You tried to kill him. A minute of madness, that's all. I gave birth alone, panicked. I'm different now. I want both the child and the money. The $300,000 from the insurance, $500,000 from the trust. Nearly $1 million in total. Bring the temporary birth certificate. I want to see whose name is on it. And if I refuse? I'll come while you're sleeping. I won't take the baby. I'll take away his cry. She paused for a beat. I wasn't there, but I was there before. Oh, and change your porch cam password. Daniel's birthday is a little outdated, Mercer. You know this call is being recorded, don't you? I hope so. I like an audience. The location? The old boathouse by the lake where you and Daniel used to fish. Midnight the day after tomorrow. Come alone. Don't come early. If I see police, I disappear. And then I'll take him back. Marissa. Click. I stood frozen, one arm around Jonah, the other clenched around the phone. I had the recording. I called Detective Mira Calder immediately and sent the file. Perfect, she said curtly. Now we set the trap. By late afternoon the next day, my living room had become a command center. Laptops open to a map of the boathouse grounds, radios hissing, red pins stuck in like wolf's teeth. Calder pointed at the diagram. Signal jammers will block all cell service. Power cut here. 2 snipers on the roof. Breach team at the back and side doors. Perimeter locked. An officer handed me 2 recording devices. A live transmitting button camera and a fountain pen as backup. Your emergency code phrase is, "It's so cold." Say it and the team goes in immediately. Or press the panic button 3 times. We rush in no matter what. She gave me a thin Kevlar vest. It'll stop small rounds. Won't stop regret. Put it on. Tex prepped the bait in my car, a child seat covered with a blanket, a big bag that looked like baby gear. The main door had been rigged to squeal on opening, while the side door was oiled to move silent as a cat. Psychological note, Calder warned. She's narcissistic. Ask about her feelings. She'll narrate everything herself. And Jonah? With Rowan Pierce, 3-step security protocol. Don't open the door, call 911, then call us. You don't bring the baby, just pretend. The next morning, I left Jonah with Rowan. I tied his swaddle with a double knot, a foolish gesture, as if I could bind fate itself. If anyone knocks, I don't open. Call 911 first, she repeated. I tucked my father's old watch under the crib mattress like a second heart standing guard. If I don't come back today, the promise to come home still stands, only in another way. 12:15 a.m. I drove out. Calder crouched low in the passenger seat. All units, on position. Her voice crackled over the radio. Perimeter tight. Jammer is live. 12:30. The boathouse emerged, paint flaking, rusted iron door, broken panes mottled with graffiti. Wind whistled through the frames, scattering shards of moonlight across the floor. The wooden dock behind where my son and I once fished now held only the steady slap of water, like cold applause. Calder melted into the dark. I went in alone. 12:39. My hand slid along a timber post, memories washing over me. The phone vibrated. Enter alone. Keep the phone in your pocket. I pushed the door. It squealed exactly as staged. Close it. Marissa's voice floated out of the dark. I did. As my eyes adjusted, I saw her standing in the center, hooded jacket, black jeans, short blonde hair, smoke-tinted glasses, hands set on her hips, the stance of someone who had once held a gun. You're on time. I hate early birds. You said you wanted the child and the money. I want a reason. Why kill Daniel? Why drown Jonah? She gave a small laugh. Money. It's always money. Daniel was weak, dreamy. I wanted freedom. He had money. He had insurance. The plan was to take half and go. Then I got pregnant, and he changed the will to the child. So I adapted. Kill the husband, birth the child, then kill the child too. Keep everything. You hired Ricky Alvarez to sabotage the brakes, didn't you? I fed the line. Yes. 2,000 up front, 3 after. I disabled the porch camera with a magnet. The brakes wouldn't snap immediately. I chose just enough wear to skid in the rain. Beautiful, like a natural accident. And Jonah? An obstacle. I gave birth in a rental, hid the belly the whole pregnancy, planned to dump him somewhere, then remembered the lake where your family story began. I wrapped him twice so he'd sink, didn't expect him to float. Miscalculation. I drew a breath and said clearly, "It's so cold." The radio, hidden in my jacket, crackled. The signal was sent. Marissa smirked. Don't pretend. Where's Jonah? He's not here, and you will never touch him. She drew a gun, small, black, aimed at my chest. I hit the panic button. 1, 2, 3. Last chance, she said, voice hollow. Where is the baby? Never. A flash, a gunshot. The round slammed into the vest, staggering me, burning across my chest. I stumbled back on instinct. The boathouse door exploded inward. White light flooded the room, dust boiling in the beam. Police, drop the weapon! Marissa spun, scanning the angles. I thought she'd force them to shoot, but she dropped the gun and raised her hands. 2 officers swarmed, pinning her to the floor. She screamed, cursed, but it was all useless now. Calder sprinted to me, dropping to one knee. Arthur, look at me. Don't close your eyes. I'm fine, I rasped. Did you get her? We did. It's over. Stay still, ambulance is on the way. I closed my eyes. It was over. At last, the shadow had a name in cuffs. Outside, the wind still whistled through the window frames like a flute, but inside me, My breathing slowed the breath of a man who had finally kept his promise. I woke to the sharp scent of antiseptic and the glare of cold white fluorescent lights, the kind of light that only exists in places where people have wrestled with death and survived. My shoulder and chest burned as though hot coals were buried beneath the skin. The pulse at my temple beat steady, reminding me I was still alive. At my bedside stood Dr. Simon Crane, holding a chart, his voice rough from sleepless nights. 2 more centimeters and it would have pierced the heart. Your pulse flatlined 3 times last night, but you're a lucky man. Beside him, Rowan Pierce sat quietly, holding Jonah in the kangaroo position, letting the baby's warmth pass through her shirt. When she saw my eyes open, she smiled. "Look who's awake. Someone little here missed you." I reached out my good hand, took Jonah, and pressed my cheek to his tiny forehead. The scent of baby powder, warm milk, and morning sunlight made my chest tighten. Jonah sucked his lips, then suddenly gripped my finger, a small, perfect signal of life. "Grandpa's back, little soldier," I whispered. I didn't say everything's okay, I just listened to his steady breath, the oldest answer there is to the question of survival. About an hour later, Detective Mira Calder entered. "I brought flowers and the news you've been waiting your whole life to hear." "Marissa?" "Arrested. Charges: first-degree murder, attempted infanticide, attempted murder of a witness, obstruction of justice, and insurance fraud." The recording was enough: motive, method, confession, all airtight. The jury deliberated for 30 minutes. Life imprisonment, no parole. At that, I simply closed my eyes. Justice at last. How long was I out? 3 days, she said. "The bullet hit deep, but that thin Kevlar vest saved you. The doctors had to operate twice. You'll recover fully. While you were under, Rowan cared for Jonah. Father Gabriel Knox stopped by daily, and half the town wanted to take turns watching the baby. Weeks later, I began physical therapy. Each time I lifted my arm, the wound sang a low, aching note. I learned patience 1 inch at a time. Rowan showed me how to hold Jonah with one arm. "See?" she smiled. "Gentleness is a kind of strength, too." Father Knox brought over a pot of warm stew and said, "God never promised calm seas, only that the boat would have a pilot." Neighbors replaced my porch light, mowed the lawn, left soup on the doorstep. Some called me a hero, but I shook my head. Heroes are people others recognize. I was just a man who refused to leave when everyone else did. One night, I lay still, Jonah asleep on my chest, rain tapping gently against the window. I remembered the night Daniel died, but this time, the rain didn't take anything from me. On the wall, the old clock ticked each beat, a story continuing. 2 months after Marissa's arrest, I returned to court not as a witness, but to be recognized as a grandfather. The courtroom was small, smelling of fresh paper and dark wood. The silver-haired judge read from the file, his voice both kind and solemn. "Mr. Arthur Mercer, based on our review, Jonah is thriving, healthy, happy, and deeply loved. You have demonstrated exceptional care. Therefore, the court grants you full and permanent guardianship, effective immediately." My heart pounded so hard I thought everyone could hear it. "Yes," I answered, without hesitation. "Then so be it," the judge said, smiling. "Congratulations, you are officially Jonah's grandfather." The sound of the gavel felt like a door closing on the past. Jonah sneezed, making everyone laugh. I caught my reflection on the polished floor longer, steadier, because from that day forward, I was living for 2 people. On my first day as legal grandpa, I made Jonah a daily schedule like an engineer: feeding, naps, playtime, and a column titled Laughter. Every morning, I carried him to the porch and pointed toward Lake Meridian. "That's water, my boy. We swim through it, we don't drown in it." Jonah laughed, and I cried because happiness, it turns out, has a sound. Rowan handed me a set of spare keys. "Not so I can come in," she said, "but so you'll remember someone can always reach you when you need it." When the weather turned cold, the scar on my chest ached. I rubbed it gently. "Hurts, doesn't it? Good. It means the pain was worth something." On the wall, beneath the photos of Evelyn and Daniel, now hung Jonah's fitting perfectly, like the final punctuation mark on an unfinished life story. I sang him to sleep with a song that had no words, only his name, whispered again and again until the night grew quiet. Then a text from Calder arrived. Appeal denied. Life sentence confirmed. No parole. The city exhaled. That Sunday afternoon, I carried Jonah to Daniel's grave. Son, your part is done. I'll handle the rest. The wind blew, and the church bells rang a single, long note. I finally understood. Justice doesn't heal wounds. It only stills the hand that caused them so that love can do the healing. On the porch, I hung a small wooden sign that read, Meridian keeps no secrets, only memories. And the dawn, after the storm, lingered for a long, quiet while on Jonah's forehead. Month after month drifted by, like calendar pages carried off by the wind. Each year became another layer of memory, built upon the laughter of a growing child. Jonah took his first steps, and I almost shouted, half in fear, half in joy, afraid that each tiny step might carry him beyond my reach. The first word he ever spoke was, Gampa, not Dad. At 2, he ran clumsily through the house. At 3, he started preschool. Every milestone felt like a miracle. Every day was a gift. I told him about Daniel almost every night. I showed him pictures, Daniel as a child, Daniel in his graduation gown, Daniel on his wedding day. Your father was brave, I said. He loved you before he even met you. He chose what was right, even when it broke his heart. Jonah furrowed his little brow and mumbled through his baby lisp. Daddy hero, I protect people I love like Daddy, like Gampa. I nodded, unable to speak. I still haven't told him about Marissa, that truth will wait until he's ready. For now, what matters is that Jonah's first memories begin with love, not with guilt. Sometimes I still dream of the lake, only in those dreams I'm swimming against the current, and Jonah stands on the shore, waving for me to come home. On his 5th birthday, the backyard was filled with balloons, the color of water, and a white cake, the color of light, 2 things that once almost took him away. Children ran in circles. Jonah laughed, and there was no trace left of the pale, silent baby who had once fought for breath in an incubator. One balloon slipped free, floating up into the sky, and I watched it drift away, thinking perhaps Daniel had just received his birthday wish. Rowan sat beside me on the porch. What are you thinking about? She asked. About that day, I said quietly. If I had been even a few minutes late, if I hadn't looked up at the exact right moment, everything would be different. But I did look, I did see, and I saved him. Rowan's voice softened. Maybe that day you saved him, but maybe he saved you from sinking into the dark. A breeze stirred. The ribbons on the cake lifted slightly, as though agreeing. I smiled. Or maybe Daniel guided my eyes toward the lake. He knew I'd be there. He trusted me to protect his son. Rowan nodded. Sometimes destiny is just courage looking in the right direction, at the right moment. As night fell, golden light strung around the yard cast a warm glow over Jonah's face. That light, that living light, was the reward for every loss. Later that night, the house was quiet. Jonah slept deeply, exhausted from the excitement. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the wall of photographs. On one side, Daniel from boyhood to manhood. On the other, Jonah from the hospital to his first day of school. 2 generations, bound by love, divided by tragedy, reunited by survival. We did it. Daniel, I whispered toward the slightly tilted frame as if he were watching his son run through the living room. Your boy is safe. He's happy. He's growing just the way you wished. The curtains stirred gently, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. I took it as a sign from him. Love doesn't make us immortal. Love makes us unafraid of death because we know we'll be remembered. Some losses never heal. They bloom into flowers on the ground where we once fell. I don't know what the future holds. Challenges will come. Raising a child at my age is no simple thing. But I know this. Every day with Jonah is a gift. Every smile, every hug, every tiny voice saying, "Love you, Gampa," is a reason to keep going. If this story has touched your heart, if you believe that kindness can defy fate, leave a comment, press like, and subscribe. Not for me, but for the stories still waiting to be heard, for the real people who stood tall against impossible odds. They deserve to be remembered. They deserve to be honored. We'll meet again in the next story.